Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Hames, and I am the Associate Vice President for Digital and Social Strategy at 3 Enrollment Marketing. I'm here today with my colleague, Mary Grondahl. Mary, can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure, Matt. It's great to see you. I'm Mary Grondahl. I'm the Vice President of Modern Strategy and Institutional Positioning for 3 Enrollment Marketing, and I'm really glad to share some information with you and have this connection for today. Thanks, Matt.
No problem. So, as Mary said, we're here to talk about institutional positioning, modern institutional positioning. But before we get there, we should talk a little bit about where we are in the marketplace. So, it's clearly more competitive in higher ed these days. Mary, can you tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah, that's a great first question to ground the conversation this morning, Matt. So, the market is shrinking, and in our minds, some leaders will emerge from the complications that have arisen from some institutions finding a much broader awareness and market position today. And I want to share a little bit about why that is the case. There's clearly more competition. The market has shrunk, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some reasons why that is.
Yeah, so like some examples are ESPN launching and Notre Dame getting onto TV every day, and just like that's basic awareness that a small private doesn't necessarily have.
Yeah, not just a small private. So I like to think about if you go back to 1980 or so, that's when ESPN started, and it's in our minds that's the seminal moment that positions of institutions started to shift. I like to think, if I think back to 1980, and there were the highly selective and in the top tier, they still are 40 plus years later,
Yeah.
and the private institutions in the second tier or second bucket, or suppose, really great education, not necessarily as affordable as some might think, and perhaps not as accessible to outside of the milieu that they had enjoyed the kind of legacy enjoyment. And then the regional publics and the flagships, or flagships as we call them today, regional institutions, primarily really affordable, great institutions. So if you think about
Yeah.
that as a kind of pecking order way back then, and then ESPN starts to televise sports on national television and really brings awareness of some institutions to the marketplace. And what does that do? That provides all kinds of resources and advertising. And so you can see then for some institutions and for people's awareness of institutions, the market has shrunk and expansion of awareness continues. You mentioned a really good example, which is Notre Dame playing Michigan, I believe, at the Big House in
Yeah.
1985. 100,000 real people showed up for that. That's the beginning of sort of collegiate athletic fandemonium, one might say. But then something else happened. Think about that as one thing that happened in the 1980s or so. But then in the 90s, you had two massive changes. You had JetBlue and Southwest type airlines, that low cost carriers that allowed people to move across the US and visit institutions they never would have thought of before. Again, the market shrinks, awareness kind of changes, and positions of institutions then continue to shrink. But in that same year, 1998, Google,
Yeah.
massive
That's
change.
that's a
Yep,
huge change.
Google, as you all know, Google indexes the internet, and it's content driven. And so the more content you have, the more people you have sharing content, it's going to drive your institution's name and information to the top of the search page. And it's almost impossible to buy your way to the top of the search page.
Yeah.
Exacerbating that is the advance in the 2000s of Instagram, Facebook, social media, and then the iPhone. And so then search and sharing and communication and information kind of trying to extract information becomes so much more easy, more efficient. So again, these institutions that are starting to have so much resource, well, I think about these things: ESPN time. I think about Google and JetBlue and Southwest as like tectonic plates underneath the earth
Yeah.
of higher education. When I think of
Right.
tectonic plates underneath the earth, those are things that, if you remember in science class, that you knew were there, but you didn't know what they were doing. That is, if you were paying attention in science class that day.
Right.
So those are massive changes. Something else, though, on top of around the 2000s and now, into 2023, is the massive, massive change in marketing automation and communication technology that, frankly, institutions are trying to manage and trying to understand, and just trying to be aware of how massive this shift is in terms of marketing and communication around institutions. So now we're at the end of the 2000s, and what else is happening? Change is always going to be in front of us, but what else is
Yeah.
happening? Meta, AI, VR, all of
Yeah.
these things are going to continue to require institutions to adapt. So, in the end, all of that, top tier and flagship
Yeah.
institutions moved into the kind of first position. Privates and those with lesser resources are now finding it more complicated to get their name out. And
So I
that's
want to.
a
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
no, that's okay, Matt. Go ahead.
I want to pick up on something that you said, especially the launch of Google. We're both going to be at the Institute for Higher Education in, you know, a month, Mary. And one of the topics that we're going to discuss in the marketing track is the templatization of higher education. So you talked about Google
Yeah,
and you talked about Meta. What really is true is that when a newly aware person types in a school into Google, what they get is a templated view of the school. So they get Google's view, how Google positions the school is how an end user who's just become newly aware of a school sees it. If they go to Facebook, they're going to see a templated view of the school. So it's going to be blue. If they go to Instagram, it's going to be purple. So
right.
these templates are are a big factor in why you need a position. So if like can you talk a little bit more about how in this world where the flagships are winning and and most schools are giving a templated view of themselves, how important is a position in this marketplace?
Yeah, another great question. And some might say that, Mary, you told a sort of a story on a continuum that one might come to the conclusion that it's just impossible to emerge as a leader with all of these complications, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, what we believe, and the kind of work that I do with institutions, is to ensure that they have a distinctive, validated position of strength for their institutions. Because this story, actually, on the continuum, actually calls for the really important need for that differentiated, distinctive
Yeah.
position in the marketplace, right? If you want your voice to get out there, it needs to be something that breaks through kind of uncontested market space and creates a market all its own.
So
And it,
let's say that I'm a president and I agree with you that we need to have a position, we need to have a line in the sand. Can you talk about the steps that we would take to execute on a positioning statement? How do you do it,
yeah,
Mary?
yeah, great point. So at 3E, we said we like to talk about our values, and one of those is problem solving. And it's not enough for us to be thinking about, well, look at all of these challenges, and we're going to do some incremental things to help institutions. We like to think big and bold. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
our process of partnering with institutions, always a partnership, is to facilitate a process that's actually inspired by something called Blue Ocean strategy. Blue Ocean suggests that you can make the conditions in the marketplace, bring them to your advantage. One could
Yeah.
say the demographic cliff, which frankly we don't actually believe in. The you can make that to your advantage with a really distinctive position. you can
Yes.
actually, by doing so, make the competition irrelevant and then cut through this uncontested market space. And then we said, well, there has to be a way for this kind of thinking and the best practice of higher ed to bring those together to ensure that this position of strength is not just a marketing message. In fact, your position is actually your strategy for your institution. So,
Yeah.
how do we
Yeah.
do it? The first step is we forecast your enrollment for the next 3 to 5 years, and we do that to say if you change nothing, if you don't do anything differently, this is the likely run rate for your enrollment going forward for the next several years. We then
And
work with your
we use
institution.
our own run rate and scenario simulator to do that. So we have
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
product that actually can give a run rate for 3, 5, 7 years in advance for some of our partner clients, and obviously, it's used in the at the very beginning of our modern positioning planning sets.
Yeah, and it further validates the need for this kind of for sort of change thinking, change behavior,
Yeah, yeah,
organizational change. The next step is that we work with a core team and the president and other stakeholders within the community to identify 3 to 5 different positions that are undergirded by 3 pillars that are really important for the institution. And you will then they flow into what we call breakthrough strategic initiatives, which actually become the forefront of a great strategic plan. And some
yeah,
institutions already have strategic plans, so those are further brought forward in this process. Um, then we have a whole framework of support strategies that actually support the strategic position.
yeah,
We then validate through surveys and other information in the marketplace that the position has strength in the market, which is really key. And then we build, here's a really important part. It's one thing to have your strategy and your position and everyone owns it. It's another to move it into action. And so
yeah,
our next step is how do you take these breakthrough initiatives? How do you take this position and make it real? And we facilitate a process of what we call process mapping and budget mapping because your strategy has to have organizational alignment and resource allocation attached to it.
yeah.
And then we
The good way to
ensure
think
that
about
the
that too. The good way to think
Mhm.
about, sorry to interrupt, but there's a classic story, right? If you were a retail outlet and you did advertising that said, when you come in, all of our salespeople are smiling, and then you come in and nobody is smiling, then you have an ad campaign and a quote slogan, but you don't. It doesn't actually happen. So what you're talking about is not a slogan, if you will. It's not a tagline. It's a way to think about your university or your college or university. It's making sure everybody has buy-in. It's the
Yeah.
position that you want to be in the marketplace.
Exactly. Actually, you bring up another good point, Matt. When many people think about positioning, they think about it as your marketing message. And
Yeah.
actually, your position informs your marketing. Now,
Yeah.
your position could turn into a tagline, but a tagline by itself is just that. It's a tagline that can hang somewhere with nothing kind of attached to it. Our whole process is to ensure that the institution knows how to and has a process and a budget and resource allocation to make the position real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we really want it's important to move to the step of the actual launch of the
Yeah.
position, and we think that that should be a public statement, sort of like an Apple product launch that's exciting
Yeah.
for the community and sets, sort of this is our moment, our day. We put our flag in the ground and our we're ready to move and confidently and boldly say this is who we are and this is what we believe in and this is how we do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So these steps, if you're not taking notes, you can find these steps on our website. The link to the website that talks about this is going to be in the comment section of this video after this video is done, and then you can read Mary's post about this, her blog post, her LinkedIn blog post about this, about just kind of how and why positioning is really super important. Um, you know, at the end of it, because we care about data so much. I know, Mary, there's some measurement involved in it. There's some
Mhm.
just kind of like checking in and making sure things are going well. But the bigger question, I think, is again, if I'm a president, I'm going to say, Mary, this sounds great, but how long does it take?
Yeah, the actually getting to the position is quite striking. The approval of position can be a 4 to 6 month process, and
Yeah,
and then the breakthrough strategic initiatives automatically kind of flow from that, and then the strategic plan development. So really, a 6 month process
yeah,
to ready an institution for launch. And frankly, you can't take more time than that. Um,
right.
is, we started at the beginning of this conversation. The continuum is moving,
Yeah, it's moving fast.
fast and furiously, and new challenges and new technologies are going to continue to require, ability to kind of navigate against that.
I mean, it's moving so fast. When we put together the agenda for the Institute of Higher Education, we weren't even thinking about AI. And now, like, just as everybody's talking about AI and thinking about AI, and the search engines are switching to AI, like, AI is a big factor in a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about in a month at the Institute. So
Yeah, and
things do move so fast.
I was on two campuses in two different places in the U.S. this week, and talking with presidents and community members. And you know, last year we wouldn't have been talking about Chat GPT and what it means for, how does your
Right.
position come to the fore, and how are students searching for you on GPT. And
Yeah.
now it's just part of the conversation. It's really important to be on top of it and understand it, and how you can kind of navigate and put your stake in the ground to make sure that you fare well when students are searching on ChatGPT or anywhere else.
Right. So, well, I really appreciate your time today, Mary. One last thing is just one more time, like how important is a positioning statement or a positioning for an institution of higher education?
I think it's the most critical endeavor that an institution can take on right now. And presidents and boards, senior leaders, and entire communities need to understand why it's so
Yeah.
important. There could never be a better time to embark upon this key endeavor.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I've seen Mary put together a presentation where she takes you through the history of these changes from the launch of ESPN to the launch of ChatGPT, and how important it is to understand, and how important and why it's so important to to have some modern positioning planning for your institution of higher education. Like I said, more
Mhm.
information will be below here. If you're interested in the Institute for Higher Education, which we've been talking about a little bit, it's June 4th to 8th in Clearwater Beach, Florida. It's coming fast. Uh, we're going to talk about this and more for enrollment professionals, for marketing professionals in higher education. So it's pretty exciting. Mary, just want to say thank you for your time today. Like I said, you can find more information below us. And I hope that you have an excellent day and an excellent weekend, and hope to see you in an upcoming LinkedIn Live or in person at the Institute for Higher Education. Thanks again for doing this, Mary. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks,
I
Matt.
hope you
Great,
I hope
great seeing you.
yeah, great seeing you. I hope you have a great weekend too. All
Take
right.
care,
Bye
everyone.
everyone.